Welcome to the How to Do Your 20s podcast, the podcast that helps you optimize and squeeze every last drop of awesomeness out of your 20s. Today, we have Therese Schwenkler on the show, who is the founder of the Unlost website, where she helps 20-somethings become unlost in life. So, Therese, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Hi, Travis. Okay, a little bit about myself and my story. I don't even know where to start.
Well, I see you started studying psychology, and I know now it seems like you do a lot of psychology stuff. So I'm kind of curious, before we get started, maybe, what got you interested in psychology?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. A couple things. So first of all, coming into college, I really had no idea what I wanted to study. And what I did know was that
I feel like that's all of us, right? Everyone's like,
exactly.
I don't really know.
Exactly. I did know that what I had been exposed to as far as psychology goes was interesting to me. So that was one piece. It was just like, well, this seems interesting. I don't know what else I would study. I didn't really even research what I might do with it or what types of, career paths might come about. I just kind of said, it looks interesting. But secondly, I really wanted to help people. And I've always been really interested in, I don't know, just kind of the human mind and why people do what they do. Absolutely. And just kind of how to become more effective and happier as a person. And so I thought that was a good fit, I guess. Later on, I ended up studying accounting, though, so that's a long story, but...
Okay. And so then after college, what did you end up doing?
So after college, I ended up being really confused, basically. I thought...
Once again, classic. I'm sorry, but this is both like just the classic thing of after college. Before I get into college, I don't know what to do. Then I get out of college, I'm not really sure, but...
I still don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
So I thought I kind of had sort of a plan. I always imagined I would go to grad school after college for psychology and become some sort of a therapist because there's not much you can do with a bachelor's in psychology. So that was always my plan. But what happened is right before graduation, my boyfriend and I broke up, and we had kind of been planning on moving somewhere together, and he was going to get his MBA, and I was going to get, my master's or whatever I decided to do. I hadn't decided on a program yet. And so when we broke up, I was just kind of like, oh, crap, what do I do now? And I just kind of, I don't know, this plan of mine just crumbled, and I just started questioning everything. I was like, well, do I really want to go to grad school? Do I really even want to be in this field? And so I went home for a while and just decided to work in the field to figure out if grad school was really the direction I wanted to go. And to make the long story short, I ended up working a good portion of which I didn't even need a college degree for, just trying to figure out really where I wanted to be. I did the work in psychology, and I just kind of said, gosh, I don't think this is for me. I'm not sure that I really want to go to grad school. I worked in insurance. I was a cocktail waitress. I was a nanny. I was kind of jumping all over the place. I was a manager at a retail manager at the Hollister store in the mall. Oh my gosh, I was just all over the place. And well, I don't know. Should I keep going or?
So it sounds like you did a little bit of everything. And I read on your blog that one of your stories was basically how you quit your job. Which job was that?
Yeah. Okay. So that came about. That was when I was a retail manager. Okay. And what I realized through all this chaos, and through feeling all this pressure that I had to have it all figured out, because I think that's how a lot of us feel when we graduate college. We think, or at least I thought, that I was supposed to graduate and become this like real person, whatever that means, and have a real job and like start my serious adult life. And so the fact that I didn't have anything figured out was like very stressful to me. And finally, I came to this realization after some time that, oh my gosh, what if I don't actually have to have it all figured out? Like, what if this is okay? what if I can just embrace the uncertainty for now? Like, why does there have to be something wrong with that? And once that really sunk in, I just felt so free. It's like I had this new perspective, where I realized that all the things I really thought mattered didn't really matter all that much, in the grand scheme of things. Like, who cares if you get a job right away a real job right away, or who cares if you know exactly what you want to do? And so I decided, if there was any time to embrace uncertainty, that would be now. And I applied for a 1-year work visa in Australia and saved up a little bit of money, and I just quit. I bought a one-way ticket over there, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do for the next year, but I'm just going to drop this expectation that I need to have it all figured out.
Yeah. And I assume Australia was probably a pretty fun time then. What'd you end up doing in Australia?
I ended up traveling around a lot. I did some work over there, just, waitressing, stuff like that, because I didn't want to stay in one place. So it was really just kind of, whatever random jobs I could get in each spot. And it was fun. It was a great adventure, but at the same time, I don't know. I think a lot of times when we go off on adventures like that, we have this idea, or at least I did, that I was going to go there and figure it all out.
Yeah.
And, come back knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and like with this new purpose. And I think anytime we're looking for something, whatever it is, outside of ourselves, we're usually let down. And so that's kind of what I learned while I was there.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I have a very similar story. I had a corporate job, living in Chicago, quit my job, and decided, all right, I'm going to do exactly the opposite. Well, what's the opposite city of Chicago? I'm moving to Miami. And as soon as I get there, this was like in the middle of winter too. So as soon as I get there, I figured it'd be all sunshine and I'd just be happy just being outside. It turns out happiness and figuring things out is a lot more complex than just going to a new location. And so I had a very similar experience with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of disillusionment there. And I think that's just the nature of being human. And it's something that I learned, definitely. So I came back home.
Yeah.
And I said, oh crap, I'm kind of in the same place I started now.
Yeah.
But I will still say that doing that was one of the best things I've ever done. Because it's just life-changing to be able to really embrace that viewpoint and be able to say, oh, wow, if I don't know what's going to happen next, or if I don't know who I am, I'm not going to die. And
Yeah.
I actually think that, we may or may not travel or have those kind of experiences. Everyone's path is going to look different. But I do think that feeling lost in some capacity and having no idea about who you are or where you're going is an essential piece of the journey in finding your way.
How'd you come to this conclusion? Is it just by feeling lost for so long and then realizing eventually that it's okay? Or was there certain things that led up to realizing, hey, it's okay to be lost?
I don't know.
I don't know if there was maybe potentially a moment of like, hey, this is totally okay. You just woke up one day and it was kind of like, you know what? It's okay to be lost.
Yeah, I don't think it was one sudden realization that I can necessarily pinpoint. And what I really asked myself before I went over there, one of the questions was, well, this isn't even necessarily about going to Australia. This is more like just letting go of certainty, this illusion of certainty. So I asked myself, well, first of all, what's the worst that could happen if I let go of needing to know all the answers?
Yeah.
And that's all you're doing. You're not necessarily becoming a bum forever. You can still be working at your same corporate job or whatever it is while you let go of needing to know all the answers. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with, quitting your job or any of that. But just letting go of needing to know. And so I asked, well, what's the worst that could happen if I let go of needing to know the answers? And I was like, well, the worst that could happen is that I won't have it all figured out. The
Yeah.
worst that could happen is that, in 10 or 20 or 30 years, I won't have it all figured out. The worst that could happen is that I'll feel like people are judging me, for being this aimless, wandering blob. And basically that I'll be lost in the sea of uncertainty. And then I paused for a minute and I thought about that and I was like, oh my gosh, well, aren't I kind of lost in that sea already? So why not be where I already am, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense? Yeah.
No.
So I think at the core of it, it was really just learning to be with what is here now. And almost paradoxically, it's almost like the more I relaxed into that and let my future be uncertain, the more clarity I found. And that sounds counterintuitive, but
Yeah, no, something you said earlier, I really believe in is I think we kind of overthink how negative things are going to be. So if we quit our job and go travel around or we do something like that, we think, oh my God, I'll never be able to find a job again. All my friends and family are going to think I'm a homeless bum. And we really underestimate the positives that come from it as humans. I think we gravitate towards certainty. And I agree. I think that's something that when I was going to quit my job, I really rationalized it out. It wasn't like a quick, oh, I don't like my job, I'm going to quit. It was okay. I broke it down and I actually went to my parents and said, look, if I quit my job, I have this much in savings, I can last for this long, I can always get another corporate job again. I can never get these years back again. This is part of the reason I wanted to start this podcast was these are really cool years. These, 20-something years are really awesome. And it's before, not that having kids and then those next steps aren't, but once these years pass, you can't ever really get them back. I can always get a corporate job. I can do that at 30, 40, 50. Doesn't really matter. But that, very similar realization I had there.
right, exactly. And I mean, I kind of have a similar story that happened twice because after I got back, I ended up getting into accounting and finance, and I was in a job there for 4 years until I realized this isn't my life. And I quit again.
Yeah.
And this time it was, a little bit scarier because this was a real job. Sorry.
How long ago was this? Like, when did you finally quit? Like
2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like I had a mortgage at that point. I was actually, so like the first time I left was where I had kind of been, confused and skipping around on jobs and all of that. But the second time was when I was actually established on the, traditional path. And you're right. That's exactly what I told myself too. I said, you know what? I have a lot of savings. I can always get another job. And that's the thing that people don't think about. They think it's this big, scary thing. And in a sense it is, but in a sense it's not. I know that in the 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss talks about this lady. I don't know, I read that so long ago, but I think it was this lady that said, or this guy that said they were surprised at how easy it was to get work once they came back. And that's what I told myself whenever I started getting scared. I was just like, you know what? I can always come back, but I can never take these risks and these chances on doing what I really want to do again.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to add, this obviously isn't always true, but I've noticed a lot of my friends that find it really hard to get a job, they're not trying every avenue that they necessarily needed to. And I know that if I quit my job, go do some crazy stuff, and I need to get a job, I knew I'd be able to because I can utilize things such as actually going in, knocking on doors and saying like, hey, I'm here for a job, where I'd ask my friends how many different people did they try to get lunch with, how many resumes did they actually give out in person, and they'll be like, well, I haven't really had time for that. I'm like, you don't have a job. What do you mean you don't have time for that? I think a lot of people in this generation expect a job to kind of be given to them just because they have a college degree, and that's definitely not the case. I think that if you really put your mind to it, getting a job, even in the worst economy, is not as hard as you want to think it is. It's this big, scary thing, but I read something that I think it was like our grandparents' generation. If you ask them, how did you get their job? They said that I walked into that building, like 90% of them said, I walked into that building, shook the guy's hand and said, I'd like to work here. And that's how they got hired. How many people do you know that do that nowadays? Almost none. And that's why those kind of avenues, I find, make it easier to get a job. But we're getting off the subject. I just want to emphasize the fact that this kind of stuff is not as scary as you want to think it is. But I'll leave it at that. How long ago did you start your blog then?
Let's see. I started in April of 2011. So a little over 3 years, 3.5.
Okay, so this is before the last time that you quit.
Yeah, I started it about a year before I quit.
So you already knew that you wanted to help the unlost out there before you quit that job. That's interesting. And currently, are you completely just getting money off the website, or where are you finding income from currently?
So I make about half my income through my blog and through kind of, I don't know if I would call it coaching, but coaching as well as products that I have on my blog. And then I also do freelance writing.
Oh, very cool. And so how did you become such an expert of helping the 20-somethings, the lost people of the world? Was it just experiencing so much, or?
I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if I would call myself an expert. I don't really like people that do, because because I honestly don't trust anyone who says they know everything. But here's how I came to the conclusions that I came to, is I was insanely curious. So I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to figure out what I was passionate about. I didn't know these things several years ago. I mean, I was that girl who just went and partied, and I don't know. I really feel like I had no interests or passions. I really, really do. And so once I was kind of thrown out into that world, I started, whenever I came across somebody who really loved their work and who really loved their life, I would just start asking them questions, and like, oh, how did you figure this out? How did this happen? How did that happen? And then I actually started seeking out those kind of people as well, and did so many informal interviews over the years that I started to see all these common threads among them. And I mean, I read a lot of books, I did it, but a lot of it does just come from my own experience as well.
So those common threads you're talking about, what are some of those common threads?
Yeah. Well, okay. What was so interesting to me is that almost all, I mean, there were a few exceptions, but like 95% of the people I talked to, when I said, how did you know this was what you wanted to do, 5 or 10 or 20 years ago? And almost all of them said, oh, I didn't know. This happened, and then I met this person, and then they almost explain it as if it were a series of coincidences. One led to another. So rather than having this very direct path, like we like to think of things, from point A to point D, it's like, well, they just kind of experimented their way into point B, and then that led them to point C, and they never could see the end point from where they began. And that's how it all relates to embracing uncertainty, because if they would have had this single endpoint of like, this is exactly what I think I want to do, and here are all the steps, then they would have they would have really shut out all those other possibilities. And so I thought that was so interesting because there is that expectation that we have to know exactly what point D is and how to get there, but almost none of those people followed that model. Instead, they were just really open to exploration. They were always meeting new people. They were always trying new things. And that doesn't mean that you have to hop around from job to job. You can do this kind of exploration, while you're at a steady job if you want to, but it will lead you to unforeseen opportunities. So yeah, that was there were other things, but that was one of the most interesting ones for me.
Mm-hmm. And what do you say to people, and this is a very common thing I hear and I've said myself, that say, I really want to follow my passion. What do you say to people that come to you saying that kind of thing?
Well, a couple things. One of the problems that a lot of people who actually come to my site have isn't, some of them say, here's what my passion is and I want to follow it. But more so what I hear is, well, I'm not really sure what my passion is.
Yeah, no, you're right. So I guess first question is, how do you help people find their passion?
Yeah.
Or what's your advice?
So I don't think that's an easy question to answer, but one person who I've been really influenced by on that topic is the author Cal Newport, and he has a book called So Good They Can't Ignore You, and in that he talks about what he calls the passion hypothesis. And what he really says, the passion hypothesis is something along the lines of the fact that, if you follow your you find the work you love by matching up your passion with work that's, I don't even know how to say it, but basically what most people think, right? Follow your passion and just find work that fits it. And what he says is, well, no, that's wrong, because he says that passion isn't necessarily something that you can predict in advance. So he says it's hard to predict in advance what you'll eventually grow to love. And so he says that passion is something that's cultivated over time. And I thought that was really interesting, because here are all these people, studying different, changing their majors or changing jobs or this or that. And every time they're saying, well, I'm just not passionate about this. I'm not passionate about this. I'm never going to find what I'm passionate about. And what he says is, you can't necessarily know right away what you're going to be passionate about. And so instead, what you should do is just find something that you at least have some interest in. So that matters, but it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm so passionate about this. It just has to be interesting enough. And he says that if you, work on getting really, really good at a rare and valuable skill, then over time, you'll begin to feel passion for your work, because passion comes from, I think it's competence or mastery, autonomy, and impact. It's less about the nature of the work than it is about those qualities. But those aren't things that you're usually handed right off the bat. It takes several years to gain mastery. Usually you don't have autonomy right away, because that has to be earned, right? It's not freely given. And so he talks about building up career capital, which means basically getting really good at a rare and valuable skill that you can then cash in exchange for autonomy or in exchange for impact, stuff like that. So I think that's one really interesting viewpoint.
Yeah, my personal viewpoint, and in some ways it's similar, and I guess in some ways it's fairly different, is follow your passion, not your passion. And what I mean by that is, when I first quit my job, I really wanted to start an online business. I knew that. And I wanted to start it in something that I'm extremely interested in. And there's a couple different things. At one point, I was thinking, maybe I could do something jujitsu related or something, one of my passions. Well, it turns out what I'm actually passionate about is online business. I really enjoy marketing and all this other kind of stuff. And for those that don't know, I actually co-own a dance clothing company. I don't care about dance clothing. I don't care. I've never danced before. That's not really interesting to me. But that almost doesn't matter, because I love the marketing. I love all the other aspects of it. So for me, it's like I was able to cultivate and have an outlet for my passion through this thing that, 2 years ago I would have been like, that's, or maybe 2.5 years ago, I would have been like, that's stupid. Why would I ever do that? So I think a lot of times you can find passion in things that you might not on the surface automatically think you'd be interested in.
Right. I agree with that too. I think a lot of us focus too much on the what of what we're doing, which is important. I mean, there may be certain things that we gravitate toward, but I think that if we focus on like more general qualities, such as the kind of people we like working with, or the kind of feelings we get when we do a certain thing, or we'll find that there are a lot of specific skills or specific, jobs or types of work that can fit within those general categories, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, 100%. So then I know you have an article, and for those that haven't been to the website, definitely check it out. I'll link it in the show notes, but it talks about finding your purpose, and it's a little bit different than your passion. I feel like purpose is, and I will say personally, I think that when you have a purpose, becoming passionate is something is much easier. So what's your advice for the 20-somethings of the world that say, I don't know what my purpose is in life? Another difficult question.
Yeah, none of these are questions with one right answer, I don't think. But
no,
I think I know what article you're referring to. And the way that I've started to look at it is a couple of ways. So first of all, I think when people say they want to find their purpose, they usually think it has to be this big, like, overarching thing. Like they have to go build, orphanages in Africa or something like that. But if you look at it this way, there are, gas station clerks who have made more of an impact on people's lives than people who do these like, broad, I don't know, like really big things that people would usually think of as purposeful. So the way I've come to see it is that you can really bring in the purpose into just about anything you're doing. It's not necessarily something that you get from your job. It's something that you bring to your job and to your life, right? So it's just like, oh, how can I interact with this one person to make their day a little better? Like I have one article about this hot dog man vendor who died, and I forget what newspaper it was, but some newspaper wrote a story on him when he died, because everyone who came to that hot dog stand for lunch was like, oh my gosh, I talked to him every day. He knew, the names of my kids. This guy was like a part of their family, and all that he did was sell hot dogs. But he had much more of an impact than a lot of people. And so it's just kind of asking yourself, how can I show up every day as more of who I really am? Maybe purpose isn't what we do, but who we are. And so the way that I like to think about it, I'm like, okay, if I can pause right now and ask myself, like, in this moment, like, am I feeling deep joy? Am I feeling deep commitment to what I'm doing? Am I feeling, all of those things? And if the answer is yes, then, well, maybe I'm already living my purpose, right? And maybe that's all it is in each moment, just showing up fully. And again, bringing your own purpose to whatever it is you're doing.
That's very Zen and yoga-esque. And I saw also that you do a good amount of yoga, or you're at least interested in yoga. What are your thoughts on yoga? Is that something you'd recommend for everybody, or certain types of people only, or?
I don't know. I've only been doing it for a couple of years, and I love it.
There's very few things that you can say, I've only been doing it for a couple of years. And you're right, yoga is one of them. But usually it's like, I've been doing it for a couple of years. I'm pretty much an expert at it.
Yeah. Well, I guess like the whole time I was writing the Unlost, for example, I wasn't doing it. I was always like, oh, I don't think that's for me.
Yeah.
And then I tried it and I was like, I really like this. So I think my thoughts are, it's worth a try. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's for everybody, but I think that you need to determine based on your own experience whether it's for you. And I also think that the teacher really matters too, because there are some yoga classes I go into and I'm like, oh man, I feel like more stressed out when I leave.
That
And
makes
everybody
sense.
has
Yeah.
their own style. So I think if you go in once and try it and you don't like it, don't necessarily give up. Try a couple different teachers and different styles and see what really resonates with you. But for me, I used to think it was more just kind of fitness, and it definitely helps with that. I've definitely gotten a lot stronger, but for me, it's just a really great way of staying centered and really being in the moment. Like I always tried to meditate before yoga, and I couldn't. Well, I had a difficult time with it, and I don't know. It's like with yoga, it just made it so automatic. And like now I can just sit there and be present almost on command. And I do believe it's all because of that, because the practice is just kind of all about breathing and being in your body. So,
Yeah, I've heard, forget who it was from, but basically that all creativity stems from a moment of consciousness where you're kind of completely centered, completely calm. So like anytime you have a really good creative thought, for a quick moment there, you weren't like, oh my God, I need to do this. You weren't in this hectic mindset. And I've only been doing yoga for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And I find that it kind of helps put you in that relaxed mindset. And I personally find that afterwards, I'm like, oh, things that I was stressing out about, these 5 things. It's like, well, let's just do this one, and this one. And so I've definitely found that it helps me personally kind of relax and get to that. So I think people out there that are really stressing out, looking for their purpose, looking for what their passion is, maybe try some yoga meditation. And same thing you said, give it a month. Don't just quit, because try some different teachers. At first, I was kind of like, this might be a little too new agey, whatever. But then I tried it once with a good teacher, and afterwards I felt that sense of just relaxation, and I needed more of that. I'm like, okay, how do I get this again?
yeah, absolutely. I think, what you said about feeling stressed out, I think when we feel that way or when we feel really confused, a lot of times we start thinking too much and our thoughts just go in circles, and sometimes those things just can't be solved on the level of thought. And so finding a way to drop down into, finding a way to just, I don't know, get out of your thoughts,
Mm-hmm. Be in the moment.
drop
Kind of
down
thing.
into that level of calm, and yeah, being in the moment, whatever it is, I think is really, really, really important, because that's where all the best answers come from for me, not necessarily from thinking.
Yeah, and I'll actually say this too. I find that I experience life better. I mean, this is a fact. When you're in the moment, you experience life on a better level. Like food tastes a little bit better. Having a conversation is more enjoyable because you're not in your head thinking, oh, I need to go do this, I need to go do that. It's completely like every bite of that steak is just delicious. And that's what I found after I do yoga. Like sometimes I'll go out with my friends, go out to dinner, and it just makes such a world of difference. It's a great experience. And this kind of leads me into my next question, actually. You talked a little bit about spirituality on your blog, and what does that mean to you, and how does that help you with your purpose and finding a passion?
Yeah,
Another
I
not
don't
easy
know.
question.
I'm just trying to think. I'm like, I don't know what it means to me. I don't. I mean, to me, it's kind of beyond words, I guess.
Mm,
I feel like most of what I write about has spirituality at its core, but what I think is really, what I really try to do, and it's not always on a conscious level, is I don't necessarily have to put the normal labels on it.
sure.
Um, and I think that's what gets in the way for a lot of people. Like when you said like, oh, I wasn't sure if this was going to be too new agey. And that's
Yeah.
how I felt too. And that's how I felt about a lot of stuff. I just kind of like would hear these different terms or these different words, or even sometimes the term just spirituality in
Yeah.
itself. can turn some people off because I was like, oh, well, meditation's not for me. That sounds weird, or
100% agree. I find that I hate, like, if people ask, like, oh, what do you believe? I don't like to say, oh, I'm spiritual, because it sounds like I'm a 23-year-old Los Angeles girl that doesn't, Well, and same thing with words like God, where God, it's like, oh, I don't want to say God because it has such a Christian based look on thing, and it's like, well, that's not what I really mean either. So I 100% agree with you that I think keeping words out of it sometimes is the best way to do it. But
yeah, I mean, you can't necessarily completely keep words out of it, but I guess for me, it's just I don't follow a certain tradition. I am very influenced by kind of like Zen and Buddhist type philosophies, but I take stuff from everywhere, from all types of places. I just kind of see the big picture, and the way I feel about spirituality is that, well, like I said, it can't really be put into words. So if you're really experiencing inner peace, or if you really know what the experience of love or of God is, you just show up that way in the world, and people can see it in you, and it doesn't have to have a label. It doesn't have to have a name. But I don't know if I'm answering your question. I don't really know.
No, I think something it made me think of is, actually, the Buddha said, because people would ask him, like, oh, well, what's nirvana like? What's this like? And he would say, look, there's not any words, any combination of words in the human language that could possibly make it make sense. So he's like, I'm not going to even try. And I think it really has to be something within yourself that's kind of beyond words in a lot of ways. And obviously it's something that's fun to talk about, and we try, but it kind of made me think of what the Buddha said there. And actually, another side tangent, in Hinduism, they believe that no religion is necessarily wrong. Like, where Christianity, if you believe in a different religion, you're going to hell, that's wrong. In Hinduism, they're kind of like, hey, good for you. Like, you're trying to find the correct path. You're trying to find your way. And I kind of take a little bit of belief in that, because I think there's definitely some truth.
Definitely. I mean, that's how I feel too. I feel like whatever resonates with someone, go for it. You know what I mean? Different concepts and different language resonate with different people, and that's totally fine. But yeah, for me, one of the common threads throughout just about everything on my site, regardless of the topic that I'm actually writing about, is helping people feel less alone. And that's what I get a lot when I ask my readers, well, why do you read this? Or what really is the Unlost? And they're like, well, I read it and I realize I'm not the only one. And I talk about a lot of different stuff on there, but ultimately, to me, that's a piece that's like in it, like at the core for me. That's what really, I don't know if I would say that's what spirituality is, but that's what really coming into your own is. It's like realizing you're not alone, not necessarily on the level of other people, although that's helpful too, but even in kind of a larger sense of like, oh, wow, I'm at home in this world, or this world is friendly. I can trust it. I can trust myself. I can trust other people. So, but yeah, that's not really an easy thing to put words to.
Who would you recommend check out the Unlost, the site? Like, is it for everybody, or just people that feel lost? Or is there a certain person listening to this that you would want to say, the Unlost is for you if X, Y, and Z?
Well, I mean, yeah, probably mostly for people who are feeling a little bit lost in various senses of the word. So whether that's in work and career, whether that's in relationships, whether that's just in general. I'm writing a book right now called The Crappiness to Happiness Handbook. And so it's not necessarily on any one of those topics, although they may be intertwined, but it's just like, yeah, if you're kind of feeling lost in life and you're like, gosh, I'm trying to find my way, I'm trying to kind of figure out who I am, I'm asking all these questions, then I think it's probably something that you might resonate with.
Absolutely. All right. I want to be respectful of your time. Is there any last words you'd like to give to the lost people of the world out there?
Yeah, let's see. What do I want to say?
I
I
think
think,
something. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, something I was gonna say that I noticed is you're right, because a lot of the stuff about feeling kind of lost, you don't necessarily want to talk to your friends about all the time. I mean, sometimes you do, but there's sometimes like you feel so alone that you're kind of just like, look, no one else is really going to resonate with this. I think your site's really great for that, for people to realize, yeah, look at, there's so many other people out here. I mean, I'm looking through the comments and everybody's like, yeah, I feel the same way, and it's normal. That's one of the big things to realize is it's like completely normal. You know, maybe 50 years ago, you're supposed to go get this corporate job and you were kind of different if you felt lost. Now it's like almost the person that has the corporate job and has that career set out for them, they're almost the oddball, it seems like to me. But
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so for me, it's less about trying to figure out all the answers than it is about, again, yeah, realizing that you aren't alone and that it's okay to be exactly where you are. And ultimately, I think when you can sink into that, the answers actually do come. So I guess embrace wherever you are right now and realize that you aren't alone is what I would say.
wow, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I want to give you one more chance. Any last things that you want to say, or we're good?
Nope, we're good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, and you have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.